I flew into Osaka airport from Kuala Lumpur. Before that it was Manila, so it was 2 flights, and I got lucky enough to get this stunning view of Osaka from the air. Now look at how built up it is. Osaka is the second, maybe third biggest city by population in Japan. About 3 million people live here. Japan's funny because it's obviously a very populated country. 130 million people live in Japan, but there are so many cities that they're so spread amongst the several islands, the thousands, not hundreds, but thousands, and the population is spread throughout this country very densely along the coastal regions, because those are the only areas which are inhabitable. A lot of Japan is mountainous. It's very difficult to build cities and build settlements there, so lots of people live along the limited, flat coastal regions. Now, despite Japan being a very populated place with, like I say, well over 100 million people, it doesn't feel crowded when you're there. So you don't feel like a sardine packed into a can. You feel like every train station, subway, airport, building, they're all built and designed for large populations of people. So you don't get this kind of overcrowded feeling. At least I didn't during my time in Osaka. It's quite unique because when you're in London and some other cities, like, it's quite common just to feel like you're being packed in, like it's overcrowded, like you're queuing for ages to get through ticket barriers. You're waiting for, 10 minutes to even top up your Oyster card, and then another 10 minutes to just get on the platform, and you don't really feel like that in Osaka so much. Now, that might be to do with the fact that Japan population is actually on the decline. We all know that Japan hasn't exactly embraced globalization or globalism like most other countries have, so they haven't had any new people move to the country. The birth rate's very low, so the population is declining. I mean, maybe 20 years ago it was much busier, and it's just a fact that there's a decline in population which makes it feel less crowded. But nonetheless, I thought that was quite an interesting thing to observe. Day 1 in Osaka, Japan. Just on my bike. Correction, on my sister's bike. Just left her accommodation at a location undisclosed. She works at Universal Studios Japan in Osaka. I'm on the little known island of Osaka, and I'm about to ride to the centre of town. I was told that you should wait for the green man before you cross, unlike in England where I just walk across whatever the colour. I'm going to abide by the rules here in Japan, respect the culture. I've been riding along for about 20 minutes now, and the first thing that struck me, besides the general cold weather, having come from a much hotter country, the Philippines, is how cycle friendly, how bike friendly these cities are. Everyone is on bikes, lots of people cycling, everyone is very respectful of the rules, of the regulations. People stop for red lights, even if it's totally clear, and they just wait patiently for the light to change. That's not something you'd see in most countries that I've been to recently. So yeah, really friendly, really clean. Everybody's Japanese. It's very homogenic, I guess, if that's the right word. And yeah, I'm loving it, apart from the cold. Japan does feel really, really safe. It feels very safe, and let me just explain what I mean by that. When you're out and about, like I was on my first day in Osaka ever, I was out riding my bike. I rode my bike about 10 miles into the city, and people are respectful to one another. You can kind of sense in a city, or at least I can, at least I try and keep my eyes open, my ears open, and I try and pick up the vibe. And the sense that I got is that it's very safe, people respect each other. And another thing which kind of confirmed this theory is that you see a lot of children out and about by themselves. Now, I can't speak for the whole world, but certainly in the UK, it's very rare now to see kids out and about by themselves. They've always got an adult with them. They're always supervised. Very rarely do you see a child under the age of, 15 or something, out unsupervised. The world has changed in the last 20 years. When I was very young, like it was more common to see. And certainly when like my parents' generation were young back, like the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, you would see kids out and about by themselves, like no big deal. In Japan, you still see kids just like running down the shop doing errands for their parents, and then you on a subway by themselves. You'll just see a kid on a train like traveling home from school by themselves. And I guess that to me was an indicator of a safe country, because if you live in an unsafe country, then it's very unlikely that the parents would allow the children out like that. And again, just something else which I found kind of interesting. So I was lucky enough to visit Osaka in April, sakura season, and I got to see all these beautiful cherry blossom trees. And I'll tell you what, there's no shortage of how many trees there are in Osaka, in the city. So can you tell me something about Osaka that I didn't already know?
Tell me something, girl. Osaka
Are you a singer by any chance?
How did you guess? Is known for its amazing food and cuisine. It's like a foodie city.
Okay.
They do amazing little traditional Japanese Osaka dishes.
They are beautifully placed along roads, along footpaths, along rivers, and that brings me on to the landscaping and the actual kind of design and town planning, city planning that seems to me to be quite unique to Japan. There are public parks everywhere, large open spaces. I think they were funded when the government was spending a lot of money in the late 80s, just before the big bubble popped and there was a huge crash in 1991. And the Japanese government invested so much money in these beautiful public areas, open parks, spaces for people just to hang out, spend time, ride their bikes, go and spend time with their families, etc., etc. And you do see a lot of these parks all over the city. Even in the built-up areas, you can be walking a couple of blocks and there's a park, a couple more blocks and another park. Japan feels to me like a country which has kind of been frozen in time since maybe perhaps the mid-90s. So when you go there, it's kind of technologically advanced in some ways. Like it's very developed. They have a great public transport system. Of course, they have their famous bullet train. Everything runs very smoothly. They're pretty technologically advanced. Everyone's got the latest smartphone, etc. That's just an indication of a country which is wealthy. But then you see things which are reminiscent of the 90s, like the hand dryers in the toilets are either non-existent or they are like the really old kind of rubbishy ones which don't actually dry your hands very well. When you go and pay for something on card, the chip and pin machine is like it's from 1996. It looks like one of those ancient Casio calculators that you would have got back in the day. There's these little kind of indications and hints that Japan hasn't really fully come up to speed with the year 2019, which is funny because, of course, going back a few decades, it would have been one of the most advanced countries, if not the most advanced country in the world. The Japanese people love their rules. They're very conformist, they're very conservative in how they behave, so I understand from my few days in Osaka. Now, an example of this is when crossing the road for the Green Man. You will see Japanese people stood at the crossing waiting patiently for that Green Man to cross. Now, there can be not a car in sight. Not one car, not one bike, not even one other person in sight, but that person waiting to cross the road will, if it's the last thing they do, they will wait until the man turns green. They're very, very strict on their rules and they seem to like their rules. Another example, when you go to a food market like this one, you'll see signs everywhere which request that people do not walk and eat. So you'll buy your food in a market in like the side street. You will eat your food there in the designated eating area. You will finish your food, you will put your packaging in the bin, and then you will continue to walk through the market. We're not talking about New York, kind of grab a bagel, grab a donut, grab a coffee, and then walk to work, shoving it down your face. No, the Japanese people like to sit in a civilized manner, eat their food, and they don't like to walk and eat, and that's made very clear in these signs. Something which is, I think, quite uniquely Japanese is these plastic food dishes. So if you've been to Japan, you would have seen these everywhere. It's a great way of just showing the person who's about to buy food what their food might look like, so there's no surprises when it comes out and it looks different. I think it's great. It looks kind of weird and it's quite colourful and quite kind of eye-catching at first, and I certainly found it very eye-catching, which is why I took these videos. But yeah, lots of plastic food to give you an indication of the food that you're going to eat. That takes me on to food. The Japanese food is good. The cuisine is excellent, particularly in Osaka. They have a very famous dish, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, takoyaki, and it's octopus balls. They're kind of baked, or are they baked or are they fried? They're kind of like octopus dumplings. So octopus meat kind of wrapped up in like a wheat and dough ball with spices and all sorts of things, and they cover them in sauce like mayonnaise or maybe green onions, maybe cheese if you pay extra and go for the full works, and they're really, really tasty. You eat them and they go straight down in one, like you don't need to chew them, like they're just really nice comfort food.
Those spring onions look great.
Really hot.
How was that?
It was delicious.
At
first they were a little bit hot.
Yeah.
But then they cooled down, and I tell you what, I could basically swallow them whole. They're so delicious. They go down so easy. Like, they are my favourite thing I've eaten yet.
What did you have on it?
Oh, I had the works. I had cheese, onion, mayonnaise, everything.
Nice. All in one. Cheers.
Now this is one for the comments, and I would love if somebody from Japan could answer this, but can somebody please explain this? So I was walking down the street, you've got a shop selling clothes, a shop selling food, and then I could hear this noise, and I approached these automatic doors. The doors opened, and the noise from inside, just coins. Now, I don't know whether Japan is particularly fond of gambling or slot machines, but this is something I found really kind of, wow, like what is going on here? So I just had to film it. This is something which I would not see in England, I can tell you that for sure. The Japanese people dress really well. They dress very smart. They're well into their fashion, very much into their fashion. You see a lot of matching outfits, matchy. Couples dressing. They're not afraid to dress up in fancy dress. There's a whole nother video which I'm going to make about my day in Universal Studios, but just from these pictures here you can see that the Japanese people really like to take care and take pride in what they wear. I have to say, unlike me, they really make an effort in what they wear and how they dress, and it's kind of nice to see that, and it was interesting for me to see the fashion. Like, you get 4-inch stilettos, you get platform shoes, all sorts of like really funky outfits, which I don't know, maybe they're unique to Japan, maybe they're unique to kind of the Far East, maybe you might include Korea in that. I don't know much about Korea, but the Japanese certainly do take pride in the way they look. They dress very smart. You get a lot of men in suits on subways, and they certainly make me feel underdressed. We have to talk about politeness, the politeness of the Japanese people. When you are served food, you're served your dinner, you're brought a cup of coffee, there is no limit to how polite the server will be. Now, they will smile with a big smile. Even in a 7-Eleven, you're buying something. And I know I'm judging Osaka in like my first few days here, but this can't be a coincidence that every single person has been incredibly polite. And I think it is part of Japanese culture. For example, on the bus the other day, I was looking out the window and I saw two, not old ladies, but maybe they were like 60 something, like not like really old, but they were just kind of bowing to each other. One would bow to the other and the other one would bow to the other. And I think they were basically saying their goodbyes, but they were bowing and nodding and turning and walking and turning back and nodding and bowing and turning back and walking a bit further away, then turning each other again, then bowing and nodding. And they went on like this for what felt like minutes, was probably maybe 30 seconds or something, until they finally then like walked away from each other in the opposite directions. They're really polite and seemingly very warm people. Japanese language, I think, is quite easy. There's no tones. The pronunciation for an English speaker is very straightforward. Konnichiwa is the traditional hello, although you hear Ohayo gozaimasu much more. You can say arigato, you can say arigato gozaimasu for thank you. Japanese is definitely a worthwhile language to learn, given that the English levels are relatively low. You're not going to start speaking Japanese to somebody in a shop and then have them respond back to you in fluent, perfect English like you get in some countries. So as a native English speaker, Japanese is definitely a language which is worth your time, worth your effort to learn, to use, and you will get ample opportunities to use the Japanese in Japan. Dontonbori is like the center of Osaka. It's where the tourists go. It's the Times Square of Osaka. It's like the Leicester Square, Piccadilly Circus. It's where you get people coming who are visiting Osaka, not just from over the world, but of course from Japan as well. So you get lots of tourists taking pictures. It's a really beautiful place, exciting to be, bright lights, colorful shops, and a cool place to hang out and get some takoyaki. In this area, there are also lots of second-hand shops. I've never seen so many thrift shops in such a small area. You can walk for 10, 15, 20 minutes around these shops. You can go in we went in about 10, I think, and that definitely wasn't all of them. Buying second-hand kind of designer, fancy clothes is a big thing here. It's a really big thing, which I think is quite cool. You know, recycle clothes, buy some, wear them, and then send them on to the next person. It makes sense, right? I've made videos similar to this from Prague, Istanbul, Doha, Cairo, and Manila, Philippines. So if you'd like to check out any of those, then you can on my channel, Arabic Mike. This is my first time back in Japan in almost 10 years. It's my first time here in Osaka. I really appreciate you sharing these first impressions with me. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope you'll subscribe for more videos like this. Please do hit that like button and please leave a comment because I do read them. Hope to see you again here soon. Thanks for watching.